Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and of course a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. I'm a law professor, and I just wanna quilt. Today I had the pleasure of interviewing Vanessa Varges Wilson, or as most people know her, the Crafty Gemini. And she is so amazing. So she is fun and super clever, and she gave us a lot of time. So this is a two-part interview with the Crafty Gemini, talking about how she became the Crafty Gemini, her strategy, and monetizing what she does. It is cool. Hope you enjoy.
Okay, great.
Let me see. Okay, go for it. Say hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. All right. So what we're going to do is, well, thank you again for being willing to chat. I'm super interested in everything you're doing. You're really amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really, really can't wait to hear your story. So this is a research podcast. We're trying to understand the quilting industry from all aspects of it, from someone who just has some of their grandparents' quilts or grandmother's quilts to serious industry people, and I think you're the wave of the future. So I'm really interested to hear your story and sort of how you feel you fit within the whole world of crafting and quilting.
Awesome.
Does that sound good? We usually go about half hour to 45 minutes, maybe an hour. If we find that we haven't gotten to everything, we've done a part 2 with people on another day if you want to do that. So
okay.
So that's pretty much it. We start with the you can answer anything you want, and you don't have to answer stuff you don't want. And if there's anything you want to chat about for the project, but you'd prefer not to have on, broadcast to people, then just let me know. Or we can talk off. I can stop the recording and we can chat. Or if there's something later you think you don't want that as part of it, I can edit it out too.
Okay.
Does that sound good? Okay. Okay. One more second. I just gotta get to notes. Oh, goodness, there's a lot of technology in the world. Okay, cool. All right, so we start with the first question. Everybody, the same question is, what is your first memory of someone quilting or sewing in your life?
In my life, you said?
Yeah, in your life.
Okay.
What's your first memory?
So, my first memory, I would say where I actually remember. I mean, I knew of it, but that I remember, I would say would have to be in maybe around age 8. My mom making our clothes, and so she would often lay out the pattern pieces on the dining room table. And we always had a sewing machine in our house. She kept it in like the laundry room, like the utility room, and it was an industrial Singer sewing machine. So that would be my first memory of I didn't really know what it was. You know, like when you're a kid and you kind of grow up around something, you don't really like think twice, like, oh, my mother has a sewing machine. It was just like always there.
Right.
But it was an industrial sewing machine, which I think is not very common even today for the typical home sewer. But because my mom came to this country in the 60s as a teenager, she worked in the garment district in New York City. And so, she worked making clothes, and that was all on industrial machines. So she was more like of an industry seamstress.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so back in those days, you got paid by the piece. So although the industrial machines were super fast, obviously they're still faster, than the home sewing machine, of course, because it's industry stuff. And so she got paid by the piece. So the faster you were, the more money you made. And as a teenager, in comparison to the elderly ladies that worked there, she was super fast. And so she would often sew her fingers under the sewing machine needle.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes. So that's actually why she never taught us to sew. Because when I would see her doing it, I was always, and we were always like that. I'm one of 4 girls, and my mom was always a single mom, and she was always very resourceful. I think a combination of having kind of an engineering type of a mind, being a seamstress, being used to making stuff, and also not having the money to buy stuff. So we just grew up in a household of you made stuff, So I remember making my own board games for school. assignments. Like I would go over and beyond. Like you had to do a regular assignment. I'd be like, I'm going to make a board game that shows this topic. And so we always made stuff. And so I think personality wise, I was always very, attentive to detail, very responsible. I mean, I was cooking by myself in the kitchen by the age of 6. So it's not like she didn't trust me, right, to try my hand at sewing. She was just really traumatized because we had an industrial machine. I mean, imagine 1,500, 2,000 stitches per minute.
Amazing.
I would love to have that today. I mean, I have one that's 1,500 stitches per minute. And it's funny because I'm super fast too, but like, of course you're a kid. And so she was traumatized that would happen to us. And she always, I'd ask her every year, teach me how to sew. And she'd say, nope, you're not old enough. Nope, you're not old enough, since I was 8. And so I saw of it. I mean, I remember sometimes when she would be gone, I would turn on the machine and just floor the foot pedal. And it was so fast that I was like, wow. But I mean, of course, I never put my finger under it or nothing, but she never let me sew. And so I grew up creating all types of other stuff. And I remember, I think it was my 6th grade gifted class. Our teacher would teach us about the world, and we'd memorize countries and capitals. And she always tied it in with some type of a different project, whether it was art, creating clay, stuff out of clay, ceramics. And I remember one time she dumped out like a bin of fabric scraps, and we had to create a pillow picking out some indigenous culture from around the world, and so we had to create these pieces and face like the lips, the eyes, and you're just using random prints of fabric. And I remember making that by hand and thinking, this is amazing. But that was it, really. I couldn't take it one step further. We had garment sewing, like apparel fabrics at home, which is not the quilting cottons of today.
Yeah.
And my mom wouldn't let me touch that stuff anyways, so I was branching out to other types of creative stuff. I mean, I made and decorated cakes when I was in high school, and I just really made everything. So I always tell my mom, I'm like, if you would have taught me, who knows what, she's like, you probably would have hated it. And I'm like, no, that's not true, because it doesn't make sense. I created everything else, any type of medium, I created stuff, and that was the only one that she wouldn't let me do.
Super interesting. Okay, I've got a bunch of follow-up questions. First,
sure.
What about your kids? Have you taught them sewing?
It's the complete opposite, because I don't want them to be 22 and learning how to sew when their mom sews for a living. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I actually went the complete opposite, to the point where I get people telling me like, you're crazy, you're insane, this is child neglect.
Yeah.
Because I put my kid on a sewing machine at age 3.
That's great. That's good. I did mine at 5.
Yeah.
Mine was at 5, and she was also ironing. But but I thought, she'll be fine.
Exactly. I feel like if you show them how you do it, and it's like, and I did a video on this on YouTube called Teaching Kids How to Sew, because a lot of people would ask me, they'd say, oh, I seen you teaching a little kid, my 10-year-old daughter or my 12-year-old granddaughter comes over and she wants me to teach her, but I have no idea where to start. Yeah. So for me, I'm really big on, and as a homeschooling mom too, if you teach them to appreciate the risks involved, they're not going to go for it. Like my kids they knew how to use a knife from when they were little. So I don't have to worry about them seeing a knife on the counter and trying to grab it by the blade, because they know what it does, Yeah. So the same thing for sewing, I think, with real scissors and real sewing machines. So they see me do it. I don't cut or sew myself, so you don't do it either. Right. And I just started them like that. Plus, of course, you got to know when the child is ready too. My son was super attentive to detail, very meticulous and careful. I mean, even as a toddler, he never fell or hurt himself, because unless he's 120% sure that he can do something, he won't even attempt it. So with that type of a character, I was like, he'll be fine, because he's very, very careful.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. So when did you start? So, and you can kind of see from the beginning of your story why what you do is there's so much variance, because you are just kind of creative, like it's in like your whole body is creative, I imagine. Like everything is about
and it's funny that you say creative, because how when you ask artists or designers, they like, how do they describe themselves? Some people, like, I don't consider myself creative or an artist. I'm really like super practical, I think. So I just consider myself a maker. I make stuff not because I'm, I have this fabulous idea of the colors and the design. Like that's not me. I make the stuff because I need it, for something. So when I design quilts, it's hard because people are like, oh, I saw these gorgeous fabrics. And I'm like, yeah, they're pretty, but I'm like, I need a picnic quilt, something we can throw at the beach and my kids can just destroy. So I come from a more practical perspective, I think, as being a first generation American, the child of immigrants. Like we just always had to be resourceful.
That's interesting.
You always had to make do. And so I think even as a kid, I kind of turned it into a game. Now that I'm an adult, I can look back on these times and it's like, yeah, it was fun for me. It's stressful and anxiety filled for an adult even to be in some of these scenarios. But for me, it was like, you're a kid, you're resilient, you deal with what you have to do. And I turned it into a game. So for me, the more limited I am, the more parameters I have to design something within, the more, like, the less choice and less options I have, the better I do and the more I thrive.
That's really interesting. And
it is. And for me, like, I realize it. I'm like, I like to just be up against the wall hard. Like, you have to make this happen. You don't know how. It seems impossible. Maybe people tell you it's impossible. And that's my motivation. That for me is like, okay, watch me. And then I come out of it on the other side and I'm like, ooh, I did it. Checkbox. And like, I literally forget it. My husband, if I have to do a bio or something, I'm like, what did I do? And he reminds me of all these things. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Because for me, it's like a challenge accomplished. Next challenge, please.
Interesting. Okay, I have 1,000 things to ask you. So
sure.
We'll do your super quick journey. So you anthropology BA.
That's right.
How does anthro help you with what you do now?
I think when I decided I wanted to go to law school, it was kind of like, well, let me find out, how do you get in? And it was, you just had to have great grades. It didn't matter what your major was. So then at that point I was like, you know what, forget this. I'm just going to do something that I love. And so I grew up with an interesting type of life experience because we didn't have any money, but my mother worked for American Airlines. So this is pre 9/11. So even though I didn't have any money, I could travel for free in the continental US and Caribbean, right? And so even if I did travel abroad, it was a fraction of what a regular person would have to pay, right? So as a part of the One World Alliance with American Airlines, like employee little newspaper, they would have an ad on there where like I could pay, I think it was like $125 or something, and they would match me up with another kid that had the same travel benefits in another country. So whereas, what do I look like traveling by myself with these benefits? It was like, hey, there's another person that can travel for the same price as you, and you get to see more stuff together. And so I did that one summer, and they matched me up with a girl whose mother worked for Lufthansa, the German airlines. And so I spent a summer in Germany. So here I am broke, work a little side job as a teenager. And that was enough of my money saved up that I could spend a summer in Europe, Cool. So being able to travel and seeing what else was out there, even though it wasn't from like a privilege perspective, was really, really eye-opening for me. And so I think having that part of it in there was what made me go to anthropology, because I loved language, culture, people. And so because I got a taste of traveling the world, I went back to that. And I always did. When it comes to language, culture, music, food, I love all that stuff. And I love people. And in college, it was funny because you get a mix of people from everywhere. And I would just sit around and be like, are you from Egypt? And they'd be like, how did you know? And I'm like, I can tell. I'm like, your last name is this and that. And like, that was just like my thing,
That's great.
And that's the anthro part of it.
Yeah.
I just love people, language, culture, all that kind of, human perspective and understanding of different things around the world.
Cool. And law school, why law school?
Well, what am I going to do with a BA in anthro, right? Like, it was like, I think I have to go to grad school. And so from us, of course, as, kids of immigrants and my mother coming to this country, and that was the only thing for us. Education. Yeah. From day one, it was education. Like, I didn't even know there was another option. Like, you had to go to college, you had to keep going.
Yeah.
And so for us, whenever I tell my mom, like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, get another degree. That's all she would say. I'd be in law school, like, I hate this. Get another degree, get a PhD. And I'm like, this is student loans now. Like, okay, I got scholarship in undergrad.
Right.
I got assistantships and some scholarships in law school, but now it's student loans. Like, you have no money. You're not paying for this. It's me.
Right.
And so for me, it was kind of like, MBA, law school. And I literally remember thinking, law school sounds like it has more pull. Maybe it'll help me figure something out that's a little bit less generic than business.
Yeah.
And I went to law school. I mean, I hated every day of it, but I went through it. I graduated.
It was
the worst.
So tell me so I'm a law professor, and I wasn't a traditional, like, most law professors are like the super smart top of the class.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really one of those because I have a PhD in European history, and I'm kind of quirky, and I do intellectual property. So I'm like not of this right ilk of traditional ilk.
Yeah.
But sort of, what did you focus on in law school, and why did you hate it so much? Because of the lack of creativity?
Yeah. So for me, I'll tell you straight up, I hate reading. I don't know why I went to law school, but again, it was a challenge, right? I wasn't going to quit. There was no way I was going to quit. But for